What am I looking for? I'm looking for our original letter of invitation to all the parties about this particular day and process. Can you get it readily?
The media release?
The media release will do it.
Sure.
Have you got it here? Or
It was sent electronically and then arranged for it to be printed.
yeah, just send it to Makubandi, ne? Yeah. Chief Electoral Officer. Before I get the formalities, let me just greet everybody and say good morning.
Good morning, Justice.
Sure. I'm far enough. From time to time, I'll be unmasking. So when I speak, and I'll mask up immediately thereafter. But I'd like to start by thanking the media for being here present. And I'll be defining the purpose of this morning very shortly. And thereafter, we're going to move on to the prime presentation for the morning, which would really come from the Chief Electoral Officer of the Independent Electoral Commission. And therefore, I'm quite pleased that you all are here, just to clear the air in the light of the President's address to the nation yesterday. We've looked quite carefully at the government gazette issued in relation to gatherings in particular. And after very careful scrutiny, that took a bit of time this morning, we are convinced that we are well permitted to be able to gather at a workplace such as this in order to be able to perform a very specific task under a statutory provision. So in short, we are at the workplace and we are appropriately exempted to be able to gather as we do. But another pressing matter, of course, is the timetable. The report we are to prepare for the Independent Electoral Commission is due on the 21st of July, which really is less than a month from now on, and the urgency is for fairly obvious reasons. And we have to push on, and we are grateful that it is possible to do so lawfully in terms of the provisions of the Gazette, which was issued overnight. So, and we're going to do that because we have quite an important task at hand. We're gathered here today to receive oral submissions from a variety of stakeholders. The plan is to have these submissions continue for the rest of this week. Let me just backtrack a little and say this. We have received numerous submissions from stakeholders. Starting written submissions, that's what I mean, starting with the IEC's Chief Electoral Officer. And if you went to our website, you'll find his full submissions there. Perhaps not full, but his submissions there. And we have received submissions from the Advisory Committee to the Command Council. We've received submissions from a variety of health experts and health scientists who will be featuring later in this week to give us guidance that we need very badly in order to resolve this difficult matter. We've received submissions from election monitoring bodies who are well-versed and trained around electoral matters. They will come also later in the week to make submissions on the central question which is before us, whether or not the Independent Electoral Commission will be able to conduct elections that will pass for free and fair in the light of the obvious threat posed by the COVID-19 pandemic. And thereafter, every single political body, certainly those represented in Parliament, have made written submissions. Again, they are on our website. So we'd like to know what the main political parties think. They are there. But many other political parties at the local government elections have made written submissions. We welcome this, and all those will be considered quite carefully. And happily so, I want to say we've received thousands of submissions from individual South Africans. Many have written directly to me that Moseneke nna ke bona jwana le jwana baba ngicela kanje na kanje, and these run well over 4,000 of individual submissions which are sent by South Africans. We also have a WhatsApp line where we have voice notes, and these too are many and have come through, where our citizens and patriots tell us what they think about whether or not the pending elections scheduled for October 2021 will be conducted in a free and fair manner. So we are blessed with all of these views which are varied. The next obvious step was to then invite those who would like to add on to the submissions they've made in writing. But also we have invited specific stakeholders, and particularly health scientists, to help us understand where we are, to help us project the disease through to October, but also to tell us more about issues, for instance, around vaccination, and at what point are we likely to reach population immunity. So we have the privilege of hearing out these scientists later this afternoon and also later in the week. I thought I would give you this background so that you understand where at we are. So in the last 5 weeks we've been working hard, and we're now ready to hear oral submissions, after which we will get into deliberations internally and then produce a report that will be available to yourselves as soon as it is out. I think that is the introduction I thought I would make this morning as by way of background. This morning, let me turn to you, Chief Electoral Officer, Mr. Saima Mabulo, and the Deputy Chief Electoral Officer, Mr. Shiburi. I should be saying advocate to both of you, I suppose. But it's wonderful to have you here present, and we're ready to sit back and listen. But more importantly, I think South Africa is ready to listen. It's a matter of great moment and importance. We're going to allow you, CEO, to run through your presentation the way you best know. Knowing me by now, I don't know if you've appeared in my court before. I'm inevitably going to interrupt you as I ask questions to try and clarify and to understand where at you are. I thank you. You may proceed.
Thank you very much, Justice Moseneke, for the invite. Perhaps before I go any further, we are joined by the Deputy Chief Electoral Officer, Ntate Shibori, and the Senior Manager for Electoral Matters, Granville Abrahams, and then our legal advisor, Ntate Mueti Kanyane, and our Senior Manager for Legal Services, Ms. Reka Rath. Justice Moseneke, there's a point I want to clarify at the outset, and that is that the IEC is hell-bent on an election at all costs. That is not the position of the IEC. The position of the IEC is that it had to technically prepare for the conduct of an election should such an election be lawfully called. And by technical preparation, we mean procuring voting stations, training staff who run the electoral process, preparing arrangements for candidate nomination, etc., etc. Now, we did indicate that the constitutional requirements for election are twofold. One, there's a regularity impulse of an election. In other words, there has to be an election on a regular basis. And to that extent, we needed to be technically ready to deliver an election in congruence with the regularity requirement of the Constitution. Insofar as the Constitution similarly demands of the Commission to ensure that those elections are free and fair, the Commission has instituted this process. And the Commission has thus not made a decision as yet as to whether these elections are likely to be free and fair, because otherwise it will be a negation of the essence of this process. No such a decision has been reached at this point on the side of the Commission. We are eagerly awaiting the final report. The Commission will then bring to bear an independent mind onto that report and publish it with or without comment. I thought it was important that we clarify that issue. We are working to be technically ready in order to meet the constitutional requirement of regularity. Yet, insofar as there's also a constitutional responsibility to ensure that elections are free and fair, we've instituted a process to which all South Africans are happily participating. Now, with that out of the way, we wish to get into the presentation. And we'll address in the presentation 4 key issues. One is the constitutional and legal context, the standard for free and fair election, and the technical preparations for this election, as well as the protocol, the COVID protocol that we have instituted. Okay, just to let everybody see the presentation, I think the technical guys are. But in the interest of saving time, we just need to indicate that the Bill of Rights guarantees the right of every citizen to free and fair and regular elections for any legislative body established in terms of the Constitution. And this then applies to the 213 municipal councils across the country. The Commission the Constitution requires the Commission to manage elections of all municipal legislative bodies in accordance with national legislation, and to ensure that those elections are free and fair, and to declare the results of those elections within a period that must be prescribed by national legislation, and that must be as short as reasonably possible. So, properly construed, the Constitution and the Municipal Structures Act requires that a general election of all municipal councils must be held within 90 days of the expiry of the term of municipal councils. So since the last election took place on the 3rd of August 2016, the current term will expire by a fluxion of time on the 3rd of August, and thus elections must be held by the 1st of November 2021 to elect new municipal councils. For the first time since its inception, the Commission is faced with the prospect of conducting an election in the midst of a global pandemic, COVID-19, that is currently ravaging the world and indeed our country. Concerns have been expressed by some parties that the elections this year may not be free and fair, given the impact of COVID-19 on citizens, as well as the measures government has undertaken to curb the spread of the pandemic. It is for this reason that the Commission, in its wisdom, has appointed the former Deputy Chief Justice to inquire into, to report and make recommendation regarding the likelihood or otherwise that the Commission will be able to ensure that this pending election will be free and fair. Now, importantly, there is no binary choice between timeously holding the forthcoming election and ensuring that those elections are free and fair. The constitutional impulse is for both to be met. So the demands on the Commission are in respect of both constitutional imperatives.
In other words, Chief Executive Officer, you don't hold elections for election's sake.
Indeed.
If you do hold them, they have to be free and fair.
Yes. Indeed, they have to be free and fair. Otherwise, an election for the sake of it, it will be a hollow and empty exercise. So the most important elements of a free and fair election would include the following elements. Firstly, every citizen who's entitled to vote should, if possible, be registered to vote. And no person who's not entitled to vote should not be permitted to vote. Hence, the need to register voters in appropriate segments of the voters' roll. And insofar as an election has a territorial component, the registration of voters must be undertaken in such a way as to ensure that only voters in that area are registered and permitted to vote. In essence, people must be registered in correct ward segments for purposes of an election that has a territorial component, such as a municipal election. And every eligible citizen should have a right to participate in an election as a candidate and to seek a public office. Political parties and candidates should be able to compete with one another on relatively equal terms. Now, these elements that I have highlighted in slide 9 implicate the work that the inquiry is undertaking. That political parties and candidates should be free to canvass, to advertise, and to engage in the activities normal for a person seeking election. Voters, on the other hand, should have reliable information about elections and the parties and the candidates contesting the same, and must be able to vote free from intimidation and similar hindrances.
Shall we pause for a while, particularly in the light of many of the submissions that we've received from some political parties and some members of the public? What weight would you give to the ability to canvass for support, or the ability to receive, or the entitlement to receive material from parties that seek to participate in the elections?
Will accord a very weighty proportion of the whole enterprise of free and fair elections, because without almost unhindered access to the voters, to the electorate, again, without the electorate getting to hear the plurality of views from the different contestants, it begins to negate the freeness of the electoral process. So it is a very important component of the whole exercise.
Because core to elections, if you just think of the word, stepping aside from the law, it's an entitlement to make a selection, isn't it?
That's the essence.
You're really saying to somebody, I'm inviting you to make a selection. And presumably to be a selection, an informed selection. And therefore, you would have to know who you want to choose, and hopefully why. Is that an important component of IEC's understanding of free and fairness of elections?
Certainly. Hence, voters must be accorded an opportunity to make an informed choice. And an informed choice presupposes ability to hear the different views, the plurality of political persuasions, plurality of different political programs proposed by the different parties as well as the different candidates. So the Commission should also apply the relevant electoral laws to all participants without fear and favor, and should ensure that all participants can compete without any undue hindrance or obstacle occasioned by the manner in which the preparation for the elections have been undertaken. Now, in the discharge of its obligations to conduct the 2021 local government election, the Commission has been hard at work preparing to ensure that it is able to conduct the election within the constitutional time frame. And the Commission is doing so, again, to emphasize, to meet the regularity impulse of the constitutional requirement. In other words, the Commission can't hold back and say there's a pandemic, and when an election is called lawfully, say, no, I was unable to prepare because there was a pandemic. At least that side, the technical side of preparations must be met, and the free and fair element is then subjected to the current process. Now, some of these measures, preparatory measures that have been implemented, are the following. The Commission has proposed electoral legislation and has made recommendation in connection with it. And the Electoral Laws Amendment Act was passed 2021 as part of the preparatory process. And in consequence to the passing of the Electoral Laws Amendment Act, the Commission has also caused draft amendments to various affected regulations to be prepared, and these are subject of consultation processes with political parties. The Commission delimits voting districts for the whole territory of the Republic, thus creating manageable geographic entities in order to facilitate the registration of voters as well as electoral processes. A voter is required to register in any voting district within the ward in which that voter is ordinarily resident. And a registered voter will only find his or her name on the voting district segment of the voter's roll where she applied for registration. Ahead of an election of municipal councils, the Municipal Demarcation Board has to reconsider municipal wards. It has done so and handed over the final wards to the IEC in two batches, one in September last year, and the last installment of the delivery was on the 1st of December. Arising from this work, the Commission has delimited 23,151 voting districts, which is an increase of 226 voting districts since the national and provincial elections in 2019. As at today, there are 25.7 million South Africans who are registered on the voters' roll. And there'll only be one voter registration weekend, which is currently planned for the 17th and 18th of July.
On the current regulations, if extended, would you be able to hold voter registration?
We've received the regulations this morning. We have not as yet had ample opportunity to carefully study the regulations. We have, however, taken note of the fact that the current regulations have an application period of 14 days, which period does not extend to the 17th and 18th of July. We are further alive to the fact that there is preparatory work that would have to happen within the 14-day period. And that is an area that we would want to look at, and the Commission will be making pronouncements having had opportunity to analyze the regulations and their influence on the possibility of an efficient voter registration weekend.
Yes, and would the limitation in provincial movement of people have any impact, one, on voter registration, and two, if it were to persist during October, what do you say the impact would be on actual elections?
As we understand the regulations, they prohibit leisure travel and permit business travel, which includes delivery of goods, the movement of people for work purposes, and so on. So, on the face of it, that does not seem to significantly impair our ability to move our logistics between provinces and for our staff to be moving between provinces for preparation processes. But as I indicated, we would wish to be given an opportunity to thoroughly consider the current draft and come to a determination on its impact on the possibility of an efficient registration weekend.
Thank you.
So if all things equal, the elections are expected to be formally proclaimed, or the date of the election is expected to be formally proclaimed by the 2nd of August. One is mindful of the fact that at that time would have been favored with the report pertaining to the likelihood or otherwise of a free and fair election. So between the date on which the report is received and the planned date of proclamation, the Commission would have made up its mind on which course of action to take, obviously based on the recommendations that will be embodied in the report.
Yes, CEO, before you move on, something humming in my head, which really is, does our constitution or the law prescribe how voter canvassing ought to be done?
No, there is no constitutional prescription as to the modalities of campaigning. That matter was left to the ingenuity of political parties. However, in the Municipal Electoral Act, there is a code of conduct that prescribes political behavior during the campaign phase, and that is applicable to political parties as well as their candidates. The import of the Electoral Code of Conduct is to ensure the fairness of the process, is to look at false statements that contestants may be making against each other, is to look at the role of the media and the need for the media to be given space to report without let or hindrance.
Has the IEC any role or influence or obligation in allowing parties access to public broadcasting?
The IEC does not have a direct role to play insofar as holders of broadcasting licenses go. That matter is within the statutory remit of ICASA. However, the IEC has facilitated processes where ICASA came and made a number of presentations to the National Party Liaison Committee, because ahead of an election they publish regulations that will govern access of parties to what they call political election broadcasts. These are free advertising opportunities on public broadcasting licenses, and the parties then, there's a formula that is worked out according to the number of seats you hold, the number of seats you contest, and there are slots that are then allocated to all participating parties. There's been a suggestion made in the Party Liaison Committee that given the realities of COVID-19, it might be necessary that ICASA provides more slots than has historically been the case. And this is a matter that we will be engaging ICASA on to ensure that they get to hear the views of parties on additional slots on broadcasting services.
After that, would ICASA make a determination? And if so, will I be able to see the determination?
ICASA makes its determination in terms of the regulations it publishes. And I'm sure that will be available to the inquiry.
Yeah, because it goes to whether or not, it goes into the inquiry of what methods are available to reach the electorates. Absent the conventional canvassing and campaigning, And it's an area which obviously it would be quite helpful to know what determination ICASA intends making in the light of submissions by the Political Party Liaison Committee. And then one can assess whether, in fact, there is a reasonable access to the electorate or not, and an equitable access to the electorate.
Yep. Justice Moseneke, it might be worthwhile that the inquiry engages with ICASA, and to the extent that we may be required to facilitate same, will be available to do that. Once an election is lawfully called, then the CEO must make provisionally compiled voters' roll available for inspection. And interested parties can then make objections in terms of Section 15 of the Electoral Act, and the Commission must then consider those objections before the voters' roll is certified. The Commission is currently undertaking an exercise to procure voting stations and check the amenities available at those voting stations. And that project will be concluded at the end of June. And this is part of the technical preparation work that we indicated we need to do. In terms of electoral logistics, we run a logistics information system that assists with planning, monitoring, and management of all our logistical requirements. And we are able, once we finalize the bill of material, to produce what we call detailed material requirement plans, which really is a determination of how many pens you need to service a voting station of 4,000 people, how many ballot papers do you need to service a voting station of 3,000, and so on. So there are inborn formulas that make that determination. So that is driven by our logistics information system. For purposes of the registration weekend, the Commission can confirm that it will be on track to receive all the required materials on the logistics information system. Going to the heart of an election is the participation of people. And to that extent, it is necessary that the Commission mobilizes the biggest cross-section of people for the election. And mass media, therefore, plays a crucial role in the mobilization of people. But this is also a scientific exercise in terms of the distribution of your media spend, which is why ahead of an election, we commissioned the Human Sciences Research Council to indicate to us how do people receive information related to the electoral process. And we can confirm that 73% of the respondents in that study indicated that they receive electoral information via TV, 57% via radio, 43 newspapers, posters, and 23 via personal contacts.
And this is communication from the IEC and not from parties. Right?
This is communication from the IEC to the general public.
Yeah.
But the Commission is also not oblivious of the shift from traditional media to digital and social media as a source of news and information, especially among the youth who are disproportionately registered on the voters' roll. Accordingly, we have had to adjust our outreach strategy to account for these developments. Hence, a significant proportion of our media spend has been directed towards digital and social media platforms. We've also been meeting with stakeholders, trade unions, business organizations, the church and other forms, organizations of faith-based organizations and so on, over the last 8 months or so. And the aim in this stakeholder engagements is to present our plans to the stakeholders, and they suggest improvements in certain areas. The disability sector has very firm ideas about how we can improve their access to the electoral process. We are looking at those proposals to see whether we can assist them.
Of course, Chief Electoral Officer, you would have read the submissions that we have received up to now, and you would have met a good few times. You actually chair the Political Party Liaison Committee. And whether or not the elections will be free and fair is a highly contested matter. I've no doubt the IC is aware, and that's why you probably have in this process. In your assessment, what are the most contested issues? What's the core of the difference between the parties about whether or not the elections will be free and fair? Because it's highly contested, and anybody can go and read, you'll see the submission sent to us.
I think there are 4 pertinent issues. One, it's ability to access the voters through normal modes of campaigning, door-to-door, community meetings, and so on. There are parties who hold the view that absent those possibilities, an election will not be free and fair. So that's one. 2, it's the fact that the past 14 months or so, the COVID duration has in fact, will have the impact of demobilizing people from registering and ultimately voting because of a real fear that they may be exposing themselves to risk by going to voting stations. The third issue is low voter turnout, and which is associated with the risk and people's disposition towards perceived risk at the voting station. And the last issue...
Just at a point of low voter turnout, you would have read with interest about the Algerian elections, where the voter turnout was so low that the party that won the elections presumably thought it did not acquire the legitimacy that it sought because so few people came out. Have you worked out a sense of the level of threat to voter turnout? You've told us about 25 million registered voters, and you've told us that COVID has tended to depress voter turnout. How would you rank that risk? How high, how low is the risk of voter turnout?
For every elections manager, voter turnout is an omnipresent concern. In the context of COVID, there are 2 issues at play. One, in the by-elections that we conducted in November last year, as well as the by-elections in December, and subsequently. The turnout has been comparable. So there has not been a marked decline in participation levels. One, it's alive to the fact that a by-election is substantially and materially different from a general election. But it does give you at least a psychological disposition of people about participating. Secondly, we will be undertaking through, again, the HSRC, a pre-voting study to really check what are the hindrances that people perceive which may negate their participation in the process. I don't have the actual date of when that study will be completed, but that can be availed. And then the last issue pertaining to the key issues of contestation, it's the fact that parties are saying, given the current regulatory framework arising from the Disaster Management Act, they are unable to do their internal primaries, so to speak, their internal candidate selection processes, because these processes generally involve community meetings, branch meetings, and going up all the way to national, to the national level of the party. So, you know, they are not able to comply, therefore, with the election timetable to the extent that they are unable to have this internal candidate selection procedures. So in terms of voter education, we've prepared short videos because we also no longer do face-to-face engagements, and there are 4 in a series that we are launching to inform the citizens about how the process is going to unfold. We also are running a community radio station program involving over 29 community radio stations across the country. One issue that appeared to cause some public consternation was the launch of the elections of the 9th of June. The launch was really part of the technical preparatory work that the election had to undertake, because we needed to say to the country, this is the message, this is the campaign, these are the platforms where the campaign is going to find practical expression, and so on and so on. There's a view that was expressed to the effect that the launch undermined this process, and we hold a different view, certainly. Our view was that until a point where the work of this inquiry is concluded, and until a point where the Commission has had an opportunity to bring an independent mind to the report and make a decision accordingly, the technical process of preparing must go ahead, because anything to the contrary will inadvertently postpone an election. Because in terms of the timelines, if you don't meet the timeline, you are, the dates are immutable and they are interrelated. So if you move one date, it has an impact on the outer date. So we certainly hold a different view on that aspect. We don't think we are undermining the process. In fact, we believe this process to be important, and we are open to its recommendations when they're made.
CEO, before you get to the next point, after the launch of LGE Strike, in the submissions we've received, there's a contestation on whether or not in law elections could be postponed. Do you want to enter that terrain at all? Some people argue in the submissions that you can never ever postpone the term 5 years and 90 days. It's cast in stone and it can never move, come hell or high water. And on the other end, you have seen the submissions. There are those who argue that you have postponed local government elections in the past and properly read, or the constitution of the law properly read, you could, in order to achieve free and fair elections, to use the words of the Act, you may defer elections. Do you want to say something about that?
There are technical nuances that some of the submissions didn't quite have an appreciation of. Indeed, it is competent for the Commission to ask the authority who called an election to postpone it. There are provisions facilitating that. But that is only competent within the 90 days. So that facility for the Commission to ask for a postponement to the authority calling an election is only available within the 90-day period. The by-elections were postponed beyond the 90 days. And the Commission had to procure judicial authorization for that. Hence, in all circumstances where by-elections were postponed beyond the 90 days, we have had to approach the Electoral Court. So that's 2, 3. I think.
But before you step off, may you do that with national local government elections? Is the court authorized to extend the period if you couldn't hold the elections within the 5 years, 90 days, for whatever reason that threatens free and fair elections?
Our view is that that is notionally possible, but is going to require, and there are 2 possibilities. One is to ask the Constitutional Court for a remedy which involves an authorization of the conduct of elections outside of the 90-day period. Now, that would be an extraordinary relief, one that I think the Concord will be cautious to issue, given the constitutional imperative for a 5-year term. But we do think that it could be, because the Constitution and the law generally does not expect you to perform the impossible. Yeah. Now, if the trajectory of the pandemic, it's such that there's the mortality rate increases and people are afraid to go out and so on and so on. In those circumstances, it might be prudent to approach the Concord for that extraordinary relief. It would have to, given the fact that it's an extraordinary relief, it would have to be well substantiated and well reasoned, and possibly with an accompanying timetable of to support the relief. So that's one possibility. The other possibility is outside of the influence of the Commission, and that is a possible constitutional amendment. Now, different stakeholders hold different views about the propensity to amend the Constitution when we face circumstances of difficulty, such as is the case at the moment.
Yes. And I've asked these questions not indeed lowering the voice of those who say the elections must go ahead.
Yes.
It's quite a strong voice in itself.
Yes.
I was just having a proper debate that there is a view that there should be an extension and it can be legally done, it is legally permissible. The other view that says actually not.
Yep.
You can't do it without, you've canvassed the point, without amending the Constitution. But those voices are incredibly strong
Yep.
in the submissions, and I guess that's why we are doing what we are doing,
Indeed.
to try and debate the issues. Can I take you somewhere else? I know that you're moving towards the end. There is a contestation here between political rights, which are contained in the Constitution, and the right to life, right to bodily integrity. And out of that contestation, inevitably one asks, does the IEC have credible evidence or information about the vaccination program and its rollout? And I'm aware it may be an unfair question because I'm hearing there'll be scientists who'll be here who are going to talk about that, maybe this afternoon. But nonetheless, have you been placed in possession of credible information on the vaccination rollout program of the nation?
We've been in discussions with the Department of Health, and we also invited the Department of Health, represented by the Minister, to the National Party Liaison Committee. And the submission and the information availed to us together with political parties is that in terms of the plans as they then stood, 16 million people would have been vaccinated by the 27th of October. So it may be that the target have changed since, but that is the official information that was placed at the disposal of the Commission and political parties, at least as at the 22nd of April. Then the last issue, Justice Moseneke, that I want to deal with is budget. We've not escaped the budget cuts as part of the state machine, and our PPE costs are currently for the election are currently unbudgeted. We, however, are in discussions with National Treasury, and there's a meeting later this week to try to sort out those the budget shortages. May I also say, should there be measures proposed out of this process that require budget support, we will have to then engage with National Treasury to facilitate that. I'll give an example. There is a proposal that was made in the National Party Liaison Committee to extend the number of special voting day from the current 2 possibly to 3. So that it's I think in my view a matter worthy of our consideration, but it will require additional budget to cover.
Give me an idea how the money becomes more if you do it over 3 days. What would be the main additional cost be?
It is firstly the stipend paid to the staff working at the election, because it's a stipend based on a daily rate. It is also the facilities that we procure. Currently, we use those facilities over 3 days, so there'll be an additional cost to the facilities, especially your temporary sites where you use a tent. You now need to lease it or hire it for more days than was previously planned. Then you also have increased storage costs because on special voting day you need to go securely store the used ballots and so on. So your storage costs will increase.
Yes. And the voting days, you know, the submissions, there are suggestions that you increase your voting days. How many days do we use normally for local government elections? And what is possible by way of an extension?
Just check the voting day to 1 day. Justice Moseneke, the law as it currently stands, and we'll get the reference for you. Voting day has to be 1 single day. What the possibilities are extending the special voting days, which precede voting day. The Commission is at large to decide the duration. Obviously, they've got to consider the resources to support any additional special voting days. But
that's legislation, that's not in the Constitution, right?
It's in the Municipal Electoral Act.
Yeah. I see. Would there be benefit in stretching out the days to 2 or 3 in relation to congestions? I'm looking at your protocol measures that you've listed here, but that one is not listed for obvious reasons. The law doesn't provide for it.
Yes.
But is there a benefit that you see in extending the days?
Benefit,
voting days.
Yes. Benefit there is because it immediately provides for decongestion. But that on its own will possibly not resolve your problems unless you have a system of accommodating people either by age or some other categories, because you may run the risk of everybody still turning up on the same day if you don't having a staggering criteria that you apply. That's one.
And is that criteria possible? With the National Register in your hand, are you able to say 60 plus on this day, 50 plus on that day? Are you able to categorize people like that and district-wise?
Yes, you can, because we have a list of people, and you know their attributes by age and other considerations. My apprehension, though, will be the storage of the ballots and the stories that could come with that. I think, knowing your 1994 experiences, we may destroy the integrity of the credibility of the process merely by creating more days of voting day. I think the real possibility that limits the damage to the credibility is to look at the special voting days. One also has to look at the economic disruption, because voting days are historically public holidays. Whether the country can sustain numerous days as public holidays for purposes of voting, the jury will be out on that score.
And traditionally then, your ballot boxes would not overnight, right? In local government elections, as they come in, you would count, you scrutinize, you'd count, and you'll collate results on the same day.
Yes, and that is part of that constitutional prescription that an election results must be declared in a period as short as reasonably possible. And it is always preferable that the ballots don't move from one side to the other, because again, you're opening yourself up for all possible types of accusations during the transition period.
Yes. Thank you.
So, just in conclusion, Justice Moseneke, we want to reiterate that we are technically preparing for an election because of the constitutional requirement for regular elections. That does not amount to the IEC saying an election cannot be postponed under any circumstance. The Commission has instituted this process precisely because they want all factors that implicate the conduct of free and fair elections to be systematically analyzed. And those factors are the constitutional provisions, the statutory provisions, medical evidence, the feeling of ordinary South Africans, the views of political parties, and so on. And once the report is availed to the Commission will interact with it and make a determination whether indeed there's likely to be a free and fair election. And with that, Justice Moseneke, we wish to thank you for your invite and for hearing us out.
Yes. We've come to the end of the formal presentation by the Chief Electoral Officer. Before I release you, and before thanking you for being here present and helping us that much, I normally look to my right. I have 4 very bright lawyers who support me all the time. So I'm going to look to my right and ask each one of them to come close to me and whisper to me whether they have any particular matter they would want me to raise and canvass. Fatima? If the answer is no, you can say it from there. The answer is no. Mulabakhe? No. Chaba? Catherine? You have no specific issues that you want me to canvass. Very well. They are remarkably bright and smart and with LLMs and LLDs and all sorts of very smart studies and very thorough lawyers. CEO, I would like to thank you ever so much.
Thank you.
This is a very important plank and starting point in a day that is quite full, as you know, with submissions, and a week that will be quite full with them. Let me just, as the parting shot, your process is, we're grateful that you have clarified the fact that this is not a toy phone. You're not wasting the nation's time. You're looking for genuine guidance and support in order to come to a proper conclusion, as the law allows you to.
Yes.
And we will do our damnedest and get the report to you as agreed in terms of our timetable. Very well. I think we are adjourned for now, and we'll have further submissions, and I think the media could talk to support staff and law advisors, law researchers, and they'll be able to give you the timetable for the balance of the day. Thank you so much, but we are adjourned.
There's a book I've read, it says, "All rise."
Thanks, you did reach me. Yeah. I see, you're struggling to connect, did you? Or is that the reason why? You just could not? Okay, but you're going back to the other side, right? Okay. Never collected?
No, doesn't look at the we are around.
Yes.
Any requirement?
We have thank you so much. You more than anybody else knows the level of the contestation.
Yes, yes.
It is real.
Yes.
You want to Makhalaba? I
This is Rekha, senior manager.
How are you?
Good
morning, Justice. Kenyan, how are you?
I'm well, thank you. Okay.
You know, when you get old like me, you call people their last name. Don't call him Sai. Say Mama Go.
Yes.
Go to the last name.
I think I'm getting older then.
Go straight to the last name. Now it's your old man who matters, not you.
Yeah.
No, Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's can go to my office and do a little review.
Is it? No, no.
So what?